This is the Kia EV9, Kia's largest electric vehicle and one of the few electric 3-row SUVs available for sale. Do you have a ton of kids and want to cart them around without using any gasoline and look like you're driving a cyberpunk SUV from the future? This may be for you. We'll take a close look at this big boy, check out the interior features, efficiency, range, safety, and more. But first, an EV9 montage. So if you've got a bunch of kids and you're shuffling them around to and from ballet lessons in a gas-guzzling Tahoe, you may have been thinking about making the switch to electric. However, up until now, your choices for a 3-row electric SUV have been slim. You could get a Tesla Model X if you're okay with somewhat questionable build quality, and if you hate your kids, you could throw them in the back of the miserably uncomfortable Model Y 3rd row, or you could spend a bunch of cash on a Rivian or a Mercedes EQS. But now we've got this EV9, which is quite a bit cheaper than those other true 3-row options. There are 5 trims total, starting with the EV9 Lite. That's rear-wheel drive. It has 230 miles of range and will run you just over 56 grand with destination charge. And you can bump all the way up to the GT line, which is what I have here. This one, with a few options, comes in at over 78 grand. So yeah, this GT line is almost 80 grand for a Kia. Is it worth it? Let's take a closer look and find out. All right, let's start by taking a look at the exterior design. For reference, the EV9 is about the same size as the gas-powered Kia Telluride. Yep, this is a substantially sized, chunky SUV. The design, in my opinion, is fantastic. Super blocky, definitely has a bit of a cyberpunk thing going on. The headlights on this GT line have these little pixels emanating from them, and it has a very boxy upright shape, which creates more usable space for people and cargo. On the back of the passenger side is the charging port door, which is motorized. And what do you think of these 4-spoke wheels? They're weird, but I kind of love them. And you can't be an EV without trying to redesign the door handles, right? They're flush when locked and they slide out when unlocked. Seems a bit complicated, but they are a bit more ergonomic than what is found in the EV6. All right, let's pull over and take a closer look at this interior. Welcome to the cabin of this EV9. My first impressions are that this thing is gargantuan. An abundance of space for legs and heads. And my overall impression of the design and materials in here is that Kia is really trying its hardest to make this a near luxury vehicle. Everything in here is really well buttoned together. There's quite a nice selection of textures and materials in here. Got kind of a nice gloss gray material on the doors. This area up here where the infotainment buttons are also has a really cool looking texture. And you've got these neat looking padded inserts on the dash, the doors, and the bottom of the center console. So overall, I wouldn't say that this is a luxury car, but there are a whole lot of touches of luxury in here. Right down here behind the steering wheel is the gear selector. A lot of people have complained about the positioning of this, but I don't mind it. All right, let's talk about these seats. Both the driver and passenger seats are power adjustable and they are heated and ventilated. The seats also have some massage functions. They're very wide and they're pretty comfortable, and I think they should fit a whole wide range of body types. I'm 6'3" and there's no shortage of legroom in here, even from side to side, which is nice. And as I mentioned, headroom is excellent. You also got these sort of weird see-through mesh headrests. And check this out, press this button right here. The seat leans back, I got a leg rest right here, and I can take a nap while this thing is charging at a charging station. So right in front of us, we have a pretty nice looking steering wheel, and this Kia logo right here actually lights up at night, which is pretty neat. Speaking of lighting up, the ambient lighting in here is pretty good too. Got your drive modes right here, normal, eco, sport, my drive, snow. You can lock the 4-wheel drive right here. Behind the steering wheel is a pretty nice looking 12.3-inch display. There's dual displays. And right in the middle here is the climate control display, which we'll get to in a second. As you'd expect for a newer Kia product, the graphics are really nice. Everything's very clear and legible. Right here in the center is another 12.3-inch display for the infotainment. Their stuff is always really responsive and works well, and that's no exception here. I like that these menu items are very large and very chunky, very easy to press without having to spend too much time looking at the screen. But if you're on the shorter side or you have short arms, getting to that far end of the screen may be a bit of a reach. So right below that screen is the user interface to interact with that infotainment system. I wouldn't say these are actual buttons because there's nothing physical you can really press here. There is a capacitive touch function that happens here when you press this, and it's kind of weird because the response is a little bit slow, but it looks pretty neat. It has built-in navigation that's actually pretty good. And this bar right here does seem like it would be a great place to rest your hand fan while you're accessing these functions so your hand doesn't bounce around while you're driving, but you will likely end up accidentally touching these capacitive touch buttons. Now, there's been a lot of debate online about the importance of Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. I happen to really like it, and that's mainly because a lot of manufacturers' infotainment systems have been so bad for so long. But as I mentioned, this Kia system is actually really good. But if you still want to avoid using the built-in system, of course, you can use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay here, and you can use it wirelessly, which is nice. All right, let's move on to the climate control system, and I'll preface this with, normally I'm a huge fan of almost everything that Kia does. But if you saw my EV6 video, you're likely aware that I'm not a huge fan of the climate control system in that car. So I was really excited when I heard that Kia came up with a new approach for the climate control system in the EV9, but somehow they made it even worse. Starting with the good, we have these physical controls for temperature and fan, the functions that you're likely to use most frequently. And you've got the temp for both driver and passenger. So let's move up to this little climate control screen right here. And I think they had a good idea by devoting an entire screen just for climate controls. However, when you actually back up to where you're going to be seated, you'll notice that the steering wheel covers it at all times. Doesn't matter where you position the steering wheel. You can lift it up, you can bring it in, you can bring it out. There's no way around the fact that you're never going to see that screen unless you tilt your head way over to the right. I just can't see it unless I'm like all the way over here in the middle of the car. It's dumb. I normally don't say that about anything I see in a Kia vehicle, but this is just dumb. Now I know that Kia spends a lot of time trying to ensure that their vehicles are safe to drive, but this climate control system right here is very distracting to use, and that's not all that great when you're propelling a nearly 6,000 pound vehicle down the road. But there is an upside here because Kia's voice commands are actually really good. Set fan to low.
Setting fan speed to low.
Set rear temperature to 65 degrees.
Setting the temperature to 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
Well, that didn't exactly do what I wanted to do, but in general, it works decently well. Okay, so you still probably do have to crank your head over to the side to set the rear temperature. All right, moving on to the center console, you've got this hidden cup holder area right here with these cool pop-out cup holders. I always love those. Kia does a really good job with their cup holders. Boop, pretty neat. One large and one kind of small. Holds all sorts of shapes and sizes of water bottles. Speaking of cup holders, you also have two right back here. Got a wireless charger for your phone right here, and then a very small center console for various things. You can throw your keys in there. But what's not small is this big area right down here for like a purse or a bag or that kind of thing. And check this out, a little bit more cool tech. We have a digital rearview mirror. If you haven't used one of these before, it does take some getting used to. You can flip that back to have a standard mirror. A little bit more fun tech right here is a fingerprint reader. So this is not to send your data to Kia, well, at least as far as I know. This is to access your profile for the car. Useful if you're sharing this vehicle with someone else. All right, so the long wheelbase here coupled with this very flat floor means excellent interior space and comfort for the second and third row passengers. The materials are just as good as they are in the front. Copious amount of space for my skinny white legs. Lots of headroom. These seats are pretty comfortable. They got an armrest right here in the middle. And this has the optional rear seat relaxation package, so they are heated and ventilated. These seats are also power adjustable. They've also got a leg rest feature. Pretty cool, I can rest my legs. But I think maybe my legs are a little bit too long for this function because all that happens is my legs get crammed up underneath the front seats. But if you're a little bit shorter, maybe have shorter legs, this might be comfortable for you. And depending on the trim, you can also get a bench seat back here. This GT line gives you some sunshades. Got your rear climate control up here in the ceiling and some pretty cool looking vents. Right here on the side of the passenger seat is a button that allows you to move the seat forward and back, which makes it useful for the rear seat passengers. Also on the back of this seat is a USB charging port, which is really convenient. Right below this cup holder that can be used for both the front and rear passengers is this pull-out storage area. You've got this little slider right here that reveals a big, huge deep pocket for stuff. And this top tray slides out, and for some reason it goes a little bit beyond that bottom area, which I don't really know why, but it's kind of cool. I guess you could throw a laptop there or something. So with these captain's chairs, there are two ways you can get back into the third row. One is right through the middle here. Even an adult can probably squeeze through there. But the other option is to press this button right here, and it will automatically fold the seat for you. It's a little slow, but it gets the job done. It doesn't quite go forward far enough, but it'll do. You can get back here all right. And then just press that button again to bring that seat back. See if it hits my knees. Oh yeah, definitely hits my knees. Nope, that's plenty, that's plenty. So yeah, when you press that button, you don't really have a whole lot of control over how far back it's coming. So this seat right here is not all the way back, but it's pretty close. If it were all the way back, I would not be able to fit back here. But if the second row passengers are a little bit more kind with their allocation of space, I can fit back here with no problem. It's definitely not nearly as comfortable as some minivan third rows, but it's decent for this class of vehicle. If you're a child or somebody on the shorter side, I think this would be totally fine. Got some cup holders, USB-C ports on both sides, and very large windows, which is really nice. Makes it feel less claustrophobic back here. And now getting out, press that button, wait a bit for it to do its thing. Getting out is not as bad as some three-row SUVs, but it doesn't come close to the ease of getting out of a minivan. Keep coming back to that. Minivans are really good at third rows. SUVs are just okay. Get out of here without getting stuck. No, I can't. I'm actually stuck. There we go, did it. So in terms of cargo space, behind the third row, it's decent at 20.2 cubic feet. With those seats down, now you've got 43.5 cubic feet of space, and you can get a bit more space if you slide that second row forward. We've also got an AC outlet back here, and there is a small front where you can store your charging cable. All right, so let's talk about safety. The EV9 comes with a really comprehensive suite of safety tech and driver aids. Forward collision avoidance, you got blind spot collision avoidance, rear cross traffic alert, safe exit assist, so it'll make sure that the rear doors won't open if there's a car that's passing. And this one's got the blind spot monitors when you use the turn signal. The adaptive cruise control works really well. Lane centering works really well. Unless you're at really low speeds, then it kind of bounces around a little bit. It feels like it's fighting you for the wheel. So at low speeds, I generally turn it off. Now, in terms of outward visibility, it's actually very good because this is sort of a box on wheels. There's a lot of glass area. View out the side is really good. I don't really notice any weird blind spots right here in the corner. Visibility out the front is very good, but you have to keep in mind that you are pretty high off the ground. The hood is pretty tall, so it's a little bit difficult to see where that outward edge of the vehicle is. And if this vehicle didn't have those parking sensors, it would be very easy to not spot a child if they were right in front of this thing because it's that tall. Visibility out the second row is very good. You've got these headrests that sort of block the third row visibility slightly, but it does have a lot of glass. So this is pretty decent for a large SUV. Although we do have to keep in mind, this is a large, tall vehicle that takes a lot of space in the lane. It takes a lot of space if you're backing into your driveway. So you will be taking advantage of these parking sensors and the cameras in here. Then of course, we've got a good backup camera here. 360 view is quite good. Another excellent way to make sure that there's no obstacles or people around you. If we get close to something, it will beep at you to tell you that you're about to hit something. Now this vehicle weighs almost 6,000 pounds, and something to consider when buying a vehicle that is this heavy and this large is that it's going to be less safe for those outside of the vehicle. Statistically speaking, larger, heavier vehicles with more slab-sided front ends are more deadly to pedestrians and cyclists and people outside of the car. Now this vehicle also accelerates extremely quickly. 0 to 60 occurs in about 4.5 seconds. That's pretty swift for a vehicle this large. So when you combine that potential for speed with the fact that larger, heavier vehicles are more dangerous for those outside it, I just urge you to drive this thing responsibly. All right, enough talking about safety. Let's drive this thing. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't generally love driving large vehicles. No, this is not a Chevy Suburban, but it still feels pretty huge when navigating around parking lots. And if I do need to cart around my extended family, I think I'd much rather just drive a minivan. It's easier to see out of, it's easier to drive, and easier to get in and out of. But this EV9 does a pretty good job of providing near minivan levels of passenger space in a gasoline-free package. So this GT line provides 2 electric motors, a 99.8 kilowatt-hour battery, and all-wheel drive, and it churns out a massive 516 pound-feet of torque and 379 horsepower. And this one can accelerate to 60 miles per hour in 4.5 seconds, and that's downright quick for a 6,000 pound or nearly 6,000 pound family vehicle. So it is really alluring to see that marketing bullet point on Kia's spec sheet, and when you step on that throttle pedal, it is exhilarating, but in reality, having all that potential for speed underneath your right foot might cause some drivers to take greater risks at the wheel. 43,000 people are killed by cars every year in just the US alone, and we don't need to pretend that we all have race cars when there's no real safe place to accelerate that quickly aside from like a freeway on-ramp. The lower end trims have more reasonable acceleration, even though some auto journalists like to call them slow. They're not really that slow. You'll have no problem getting up to speed or passing cars on the freeway, even even with those lower end trims. So what I think we should all care about more than outright speed is the level of comfort that you find in here. It's excellent. It's very easy to stretch out and not feel cramped in here. I carted around my friend's family from the airport and everyone commented on how pleasant of a drive it was. Well, except for all of the LA traffic. And it's just profoundly quiet in here. It really is a quiet cabin on the freeway. And this ride quality is geared towards comfort as well, even though it does feel a bit bouncy and jouncy over uneven pavement. Feels like the back end moves around a little bit over potholes. Like other electric Kia and Hyundai products, we do have a few different levels of brake regen here that can be selected using these paddle shifters. And yes, you can do one pedal driving here, which will slow your car down to a stop when you let off the throttle. All right, so let's talk about range, efficiency, and charging. This GT line gives you an estimated 270, but in many third-party tests, it's done much better than that. Still, 270 should be plenty if you regularly charge at home. I've driven this EV9 for about a week on all sorts of roads, speeds, and traffic situations, and my efficiency has been pretty low. According to the trip computer here, I've only managed 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour, the lowest I've experienced with any EV that I've tested. So yes, this is a big, heavy EV, and that likely could have something to do with it. It's also pretty hot out. I've been using the air conditioning a whole lot, and I have seen others that have gotten better efficiency with this vehicle. The EPA ratings here are 88 miles per gallon equivalent city, 72 highway. That's still obviously way better than any gas-powered SUV, and over the long term, it should be cheaper to operate. But still, smaller EVs are obviously going to be a lot more efficient. In terms of charging, the EV is pretty quick. This is an 800-volt system, so under ideal situations, it can get from 10 to 80% charge in about 25 minutes. That's faster than the BMW iX that I recently tested. But if you've spent any amount of time experiencing DC fast chargers in the US, you'll know that they can sometimes be unreliable and slow. So if you're thinking about buying any EV, I would suggest that you try to do most of your charging at home. At home on a level 2 charger, it should take about 6 to 7 hours to get to a full charge. But this EV9 only came with a level 1 charging cable, and it's going to take a whole lot more with that. This EV9 GT line is also rated to tow 5,000 pounds, and towing does severely eat into your EV range, and DC fast charging stations aren't really set up for tow vehicles, but this tow rating might prove to be useful for some short trips. We've also got an onboard power generator function, and that allows you to utilize the EV9 as a mobile power source, perfect for annoying your neighbors with some terrible guitar playing in your driveway. All right, so what's the price for this giant blue 3-row SUV? The EV9 Lite starts at just over 57 grand after destination charge, and this top-of-the-line GT line with this pretty ocean blue paint and the rear seat relaxation package comes to $78,430. And rumor has it that an even more expensive GT trim is on the horizon. So when it comes to that somewhat eye-watering price, there are a few things to consider. This EV9 provides the space and style of something like the Rivian R1S. That base model R1S is the same price as this top trim EV9. But in general, 78 grand is a lot of money for a car, period. The average new car price is $50,000. If you buy this top trim, payments are likely going to be well over a grand a month, so I'm guessing a lot of these will be leased. If you were set on an EV9, I think the light long range is the sweet spot. You get the best range and it still has a good suite of features, but it is still $60,000. So there really isn't much competition here. 3-row EVs are still sort of few and far between. The Tesla Model X was refreshed a few years ago, but the build quality isn't as good as this Kia, and it's a lot more expensive. And honestly, I can't count the number of people that have told me they won't buy a Tesla as long as this guy's at the helm. The Rivian R1S has a very nice interior, a good 3rd row, and it looks awesome, but it's also super pricey. Or you might even cross-shop this against the gas-powered Kia Telluride. That has a similar amount of interior space, but it has a substantially cheaper base price. They start at around 38 grand. But then again, you'll be burning gas. And you know what, even something like a Chevy Tahoe might be a consideration. Those are a fair amount larger than the EV9. They start at around 60 grand and can top out at over $80,000. And of course, once again, you'll be burning gas, a lot of it. All right, so what's my verdict? If you've got a large family and you've decided you want to go electric and you've got the cash, the EV9 is probably the best option out there for you. It's super spacious, it's got a lovely interior, it looks rad, it charges quickly, and it has decent range. Driving this for the last week has just generally been fantastic. But of course, with every vehicle, there are some negatives. This is a large, heavy vehicle, so I've found that the efficiency isn't the best. And in my opinion, the design of the climate control system is at best annoying and at worst, super distracting. So yes, this EV9 is quite large, and I'm generally not a fan of large, expensive SUVs, so it's not for me. But if you regularly need to cart around a bunch of kids and all of their stuff, the EV9 might be a great choice for you. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon. If you want to help support the channel, please buy a Hello Road t-shirt or hat at helloroad.tv/shop. I hope you're well, and I'll see you soon.